one of our core artists. And the reason I asked Jim was because I found his, well, here we have a mirror. His work, it absolutely fitted that territory, in the sense that he clearly is bringing together lots of different art forms in terms of the art that he makes. So I'm going to give you a little introduction. Is it Pilston?
Pilston.
Pilston. I never know,
Like a stone without an E.
All right, so Jim Pilston studied design and illustration and worked as an illustrator for many years. His fascination with folklore and legend led him to work on three-dimensional pieces using papier-mâché and mixed media, recycled materials, and anything from scrapped wood to discarded plastic. So, absolutely, in terms of the materials, going right across, not the obvious materials that you would use. So I'd be very happy to introduce Jim, who's going to talk a little bit about his process and his work. Thank you so much.
Okay. I'll try and be fairly quick. So I'm Jim. I live up in Stroud, so a bit like Glastonbury, a little mini satellite Glastonbury. I live up there, work up there. I grew up there. I have a lot of work in the middle room. It's all kind of, it looks a little like these ones, that kind of thing. So if it's got that face, it's generally more. So I'm a sculptor, a sort of accidental sculptor really. I work in mixed media. The technical word for it is air-dried cellular polymer clay, but it's paper mache, really. It really is just paper mache. I try and use recycled materials wherever possible. So, I'll go through it a bit with, not in great detail, but I'll go through it a little bit later. But I try and use almost entirely recycled materials. So where I use a filler, it's generally taken out of a skip that a builder's thrown away. Same with PVA, because builders throw everything away these days. They don't store anything, they chuck it away. So I nick it out of the skips. Same with all the wood substructures and that kind of thing. So yes, going right back, where it all started, I never really got over my childhood. Like most artists, I think we all kind of are going back to our childhood. And it kind of started with this book that my dad got in a charity shop in the 60s or early 70s. You can see I've started drawing on it because that was the sort of kid I was. It was a book of European folk toys, and I just loved it. I loved it so much. I'll show you a couple of illustrations from it. And I never got any of those toys, and I just spent my whole time looking at this book of toys, or so much of my time. And I also had I'll go through some of my inspirations first, and then we'll go through the process. I had an aunt in Germany who used to send me advent calendars of German toys, and I just was completely obsessed with them. They're all these little wooden figures that, when you go over to Germany and Eastern Europe, there's so much of this folk art. And I'm very much consider myself more of a folk artist than a sort of... I'm an artist, but it's kind of folk art that I'm particularly interested in. I love all art, but it's folk art that I'm particularly interested in. So these toys, they just completely kind of enraptured me, really. This is the book, and I'll just go through a couple of, you can see where my work comes from.
Totally.
Yeah, I just never got over that, and I've built a whole career around that one image, really. It all comes from that. And whenever I like things, I'll go into a cathedral and there'll be little faces. It's the little faces that get me, and the little hands, and that kind of thing. So that's what I've always been trying to recreate all my life. There again, it's the patterns, the colours. My brother is a sculptor, and he was also a doctor, and he was a surgeon. He does fantastically beautiful, anatomically correct, wonderful sculptures. and that's not my not my skill set at all. I couldn't do it if I tried.
How do you get on?
Oh, we get on really well, yeah. And it's odd because we do have similar themes of art. So he does a lot of sculptures of sort of gods, goddesses, that kind of thing. So we do cross over quite a lot. So yeah, that was where it all sort of started. And this book as well. This was in our library, and I loved it so much. And then I finally found it in a charity shop years later. But our library, I had a teacher who pointed me at this book when I was about 7, 8, and I'm eternally grateful to him really, because it was before the national curriculum where teachers just rambled on like I'm doing about what they wanted. They didn't really have much of an agenda sort of externally. They really just taught you what they were interested in. And he just used to tell us ghost stories about the local town all the time, which is quite an interesting thing for a 7-year-old. I mean, it terrified me, but it was brilliant. And he also taught us a lot about folklore. We learned Morris dancing. There was all sorts of things. Yeah, he was great. But this book, I mean, it's all illustrated by, a lot of it's illustrated by Fraser Gill, who was just a fantastic, and again, it's about, that's quite out of focus, but it's about the hands, and it's very medievalist. It's about the hands and the faces and the clothes. Anyway, so that was very kind of, I became quite obsessed with folklore. That one is another book, and it was the colours in that book that completely got me. I was very booky. I didn't read. I just looked at the pictures. I wasn't really interested in the text. I wanted people to read it to me. But yeah, you can see that 1970s colour aesthetic in there. Morris Sendak as well. He was another hugely influential figure for me. Again, it's that slight sort of, they're in profile, they're like in a tableau, they're almost in a bas relief kind of thing, and they've got great little faces and great little hands that are just sort of like just lovely figures. Morris Sendak is a wonderful illustrator. That I put in because when I was little I used to go up to London with my mum, and she used to take me to gold toys and heels and liberties and shops like that in the 70s were just full of little artisan toy makers really. It was before the CE number, so you know, it was just somebody used to, I mean my mum used to make rag dolls and sell them to heels. That's not one of hers, but it was quite similar. And these places were fantastically kind of inspirational. They weren't like Toys R Us. There wasn't that much plastic. So then, sorry, I'm jumping around a lot. These are all about my inspirations and where my childhood sort of took me. This book, has anyone read it?
No.
Oh God,
Looks good though.
That's good.
It's fantastic. And there's another one. There's a series of 5, and they are all entwined about. They're about folklore entwined with the modern world. There's a sequence. They're called the Darkest Rising sequence, and this is where I first kind of came across Herne the Hunter, who is quite a theme for me. The Horned Man, Sarunos, all those kind of names he has. She is amazing, Susan Cooper. She's a wonderful writer. And this guy, Michael, I've forgotten his surname, something. Great illustrator. Yeah, it's about British folklore and the overlay between where we live now and all those stories are still there, really, in sort of layered on top. We just sort of live on top of a country that has so much history and so many things going on. Somebody, I can't remember what it was written in, but somebody said, you know, this country is just littered with the bones of dead people, and it is everywhere. You know, if you think about where I'm standing, there would have been an oak tree and a deep forest. You know, people may have lived nearby, they may have not lived nearby. You know, it might have been. There's so many stories and layers that just it's piled up, and that really appealed to me as well. That idea that there's just all those kind of histories and stories just overlap, and the idea that some of them could push through, and sometimes you will get that sense of, God, this place is ancient, and there was people here before, and I love that. You know, it's a sort of a constant. So again, that one's set in Cornwall, and the green man, green woman, she's a recurring figure in all my work. I mean, you can see. This guy, Oliver Postgate, he did Nog in the Nog, Pogleswood, a lot of you would be far too young to remember it, but it was very kind of important kids' telly from that period. Very eccentric. Kids' telly is often, Teletubbies was pretty eccentric. Kids' telly is often eccentric, you know. But this one, even the BBC found that too scary. It was axed.
I found it on
It was
video.
like, that's not really for 5-year-olds. But, you know, that really had an effect on me. It terrified me and stayed with me. And when I make figures, these are the figures that I kind of want to draw back on and go back to. This is another one from Oliver Postgate. I just like to put this because this figure was from Bagpuss, I think, and he was the littlest giant or something in the world. But yeah, I mean you can see my work in there so much. And yeah, I think that's a polymer clay. Nog in the Nog again, Oliver Postgate, he was just brilliant. Peter Firmin as well. I think, yeah, that's also obviously where his inspiration was from. That's Lewis Chessman.
What period is that? Medieval?
They dug them up on a beach in Lewis. There's not a full set, but almost a full set. And he just lifted it straight from that, really, which is what I do. It's what all artists do. There's nothing kind of truly original. We're just collecting and curating and moving it on. So yeah, they were ivory. They're about 600 AD.
Okay. Wow.
So, and they were just found in a sand dune. I love them. They are so fantastic. They're in the British Museum now. They're worth a look. So there's my green man. So that's kind of inspiration. So career, for my path, I went off to art college just to escape, really, just to get out and get away from the small town and try living in a big city. And I went and did theatre design. I don't really know why, because I wasn't ever very interested in theatre. I never got that thrill when the lights went down and you thought, ooh, I was always a bit sort of, when do I get ice cream? You know? But I think, looking back, I did it because I liked models and dolls' houses. And I couldn't quite admit that was what I liked, you know. But it was the doll's house element of theatre design where you get to make a little model with tiny people and, you know, sliding scenery. So I did 3 years of that, and I did a couple of years working odds and ends in theatres, but I never really felt that comfortable with it. So I did a master's degree in illustration, again, sort of specialising in, and this is one of the illustrations. These are all the illustrations I did. And then I did about 10 years working as an illustrator and grew to really, really hate it. I got so bored of getting, I mean, in those days it was a fax, and towards the end an email. You'd get an email saying, can you just copy this but make it different enough so we don't get sued? And you'd be sort of, really? You know, I don't want to. But I had to pay the mortgage. But anyway, I came to a grinding halt, couldn't stand it anymore and just stopped. That's another one I did. Again, that's folklore and the Green Man, there he is again. He keeps cropping up. So I came to a grinding halt and bizarrely ran off and joined the police force. Which was a bit of a shock, yeah. I mean, it's so unsuited to me. It's so unsuited to me. Most people run off and join the circus, so yeah. I mean, no, it was exactly that. I can't believe it. It was because it was when they just invented the PCSO.
What's that?
The Police Community Support Officer. And I had no sort of skills outside art. I had no skills and couldn't. So I was applying for anything, and so I applied for anything that came up on online. And I applied for this job, and bizarrely, they phoned me up and said, "Do you want to come in for an interview?" And I was like, "Really? Okay."
How long did you do that for?
I did it for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
And then one day I was sat in a police station and I just thought, what the hell am I doing? How does this happen? You know, it was really odd. And I went home pretty much that day and I started making things in my garage out of just stuff, because we've been doing up houses, so I had lots of rubbish from builders, builders stuff. You have lots of boxes of half-made bits of IKEA furniture and plaster and PVA and oil. And so I went home and I started making things, and that's when we illustrate. Again, angels are a big thing. So that one's there because it's more, these are the angels and the figureheads there. So when I started making things, I started making angels, and that's how I start making them. That's how sort of cobbled together they are out of things from skips. It's bits of old MDF. I mean, I'm really trying. I don't ever go to art shops. Occasionally I go to B&Q, but really everything is from skips. So yeah, I left the police force and started making these, and after about, well, that was about 15 years ago I started, and I've been making them ever since, and now I make a living making strange figures out of old bits of waste materials, and that's sort of what I want to do. I love the idea of taking something that is from a skip and from rubbish that nobody's interested in, and making something that people value and will maybe stay out of landfill for 200 years. You know, it might just go on somebody's wall and end up on Antiques Roadshow in 300 years' time saying, you know, this is a strange piece of something. So I basically cut out a vague shape from bits of old timber and MDF. Then I block it out with bits of polystyrene, again from a tip. You can see some strange things going on. And then I sort of tie them together with bits of wire and bits of anything really. They're wound together with wire, polystyrene, sellotape, anything. You can see she's been glued together, lumps of things, just all stuck together. And then I cover them in this stuff, which is, there's a website called ultimatepapier-mache.com. Which is like, she'd have on a t-shirt, ultimate papier-mache. she's brilliant. She's this eccentric, well, we're all eccentric, we're all eccentrics. She lives in Arizona. She makes the most amazing sculptures out of papier-mâché. She's very egalitarian, so all her recipes are online. And they're all worth a look, especially because it's so cheap and it's so easy, and environmentally it's pretty sound. There are some, like we have to put a bit of PVA in, which is a plastic, but it's pretty eco-friendly really in many ways. And that's where I lifted all her recipes, and I always pass them on because I think it's important to be egalitarian really. I don't want to keep anything secret about what I use, but the stuff is it's incredibly hard, and I've often dropped it and thought, oh my god, what's it going to do? And it's fine, it's really tough. I won't go into the real details, but basically it's some paper pulp, whatever you use. I use egg boxes a lot. Toilet roll is great, especially the really rubbish toilet roll. So the worse quality, the better. Toilet roll's good because it's quick and easy, because it's designed to break up the fibres. So you just put it in a food processor. You add some corn flour, some polyfiller, some PVA, and a little bit of linseed oil, or any oil. I use corn flour. I've also used gram flour, anything that's gone off in the kitchen really, just chuck it in. The same with oil. If you've got some oil that you think, I'm never going to use that. You mix it all up in your food processor, you put it on, and it becomes rock hard and very kind of carvable with a Stanley knife. You can sand it, you can carve it, you can make anything out of it. I've made furniture out of it. I've filled bits of old beams in the house with it. It's really good. I've used it on so many things. I've made clothing out of it, like hats and masks and things. I just love it. It's endlessly friendly as a material, and it's endlessly available because it's made from rubbish mostly. It's brilliant. The only, environmentally, it's got PVA in it, which is a plastic. Apart from that, it's pretty much all recycled, because the polyfiller I get out of skips, or if you've got a friendly builder, they're always chucking out a bag of filler, because they open it, do a little job, chuck it away, because they're going on to the next job. And builders used to have a yard where they stored things, but they don't anymore because of the costs of rental. So they generally throw it away. So always keep your eye on the skip. The other good one is Corex, which is estate agent signs. That plastic that's ridged, that's really good for making these things with. Because you can that I just put in because that was another book I had as a kid, and I loved the illustrations, and I always had a bit of a thing about circuses, and particularly Victorian circus art. And the whole patterns and the lettering, you can see it all sort of ties in. It's quite good having that there because it counterpoints it. Yeah. So that's there, an estate agent sign with this polyfiller put on the top. And I just love the fact that it's made entirely from rubbish. And when you finish them, they're quite sort of lovely. They're nice things that people want and value. Those I just put in because they're very Glastonbury and I love them. It's about that British, and all cultures have it. I'm particularly exposed to the British part of folklore because I've lived here all my life. But all cultures have that sort of strange kind of dressing up and needing to commune and be with something else and be something different. So yeah, again, the Green Man, he's everywhere. There's one of my Green Men. And Herne as well, that ties in. The other thing, you can see it's straight there. it's folk art that I'm particularly interested in. This is a graveyard near me that's got this person. I imagine it was a man because I think stonemasons generally were in the 1600s. But this bloke, you can see which graveyards he worked in around the village where I work. And I just love the fact that you can see his work. You know, as soon as you walk by, he's an unknown person, but there he is, you know. His work's there. And that really appeals to me, and carrying that on. And I love the idea that somebody might look at my stuff in 150 years' time and think, God, what is that? That's a funny one. I can really sort of see who that person was. So there we go, and that there. So this is all papier-mâché and bits of old stuff. Again, more graves, same guy. That's some of the furniture that I do. Some of it's quite little, some of it's really little, some of it's quite big. I've done some really quite big pieces of furniture. I mean, the Japanese and Chinese have done papier-mâché furniture for thousands of years, and some of it, at Compton Burney, I think they've got some sort of 2,000-year-old papier-mâché furniture, which is just like, wow, that's amazing. Elizabeth Frank, she's just a fantastic sculptor. I would never, put myself anywhere near her as a sculptor, but she's so inspirationally fantastic. I love her work, and you can see where my stuff comes from in there, or where it allies. These are just chucked in because they give you. I don't. If you're impatient like I am, I've got no attention span. As you can tell probably from listening to me, I bounce around onto the next thing all the time. I've got no attention span, so I cannot be bothered to plan at all. I'd have been a terrible architect. That's about as much drawing as I do for a sculpture, and then I just start making it because that's it. I'm really interested in getting on to making it. So that would be that, and it completely. I have a vague destination when I know roughly what I want to make, but I let it direct me as well, and they change. Just another fantastic green man, green woman. There's no reason it needs to be the bloke all the time. Green women are important. I pick up little bits of folk art everywhere. I think that's in the Ashmolean, and you can see, that's one of my green women, but you can see where she comes from. And again, folk art always just fascinates me. It interests me more than allegedly fine art. I feel more connection often with the person who made that, and perhaps wasn't as skilled as. Maybe that's what I'm connecting with. It's their sort of ad hocness. Again, it's one of the drawings. That's what it became. And he was quite large. He was about this big. Again, that's the level of drawing, and that's the end result. Again, that ties in with the whole German folk toy thing, because these are little Rauchen man, which they smoke. You put a little candle in, and it's great. The Germans, they invented a toy that smokes. Isn't that fantastic? And you put a little joss stick cone in, and they just smoke. It's just so, I love it. It's a little Christmas decoration from Germany. A few more green men, just because he's so brilliant as a figure. That's Gear. And these are all kind of books I had as kids, and I never really got over them. They've stuck with me. I think most artists always want to sort of go back to somewhere in their childhood at some level, and that's certainly what I've been doing. The three-headed Celtic thing. I think that idea of three as a sort of trinity and a sacred quality is important. A lot of my work ends up in threes. And I don't think it's too extreme. It's part of that thing I was saying about I love taking rubbish and making something that is almost sacred. So I love religious art. I'm not especially religious or even spiritual, but I love the idea of something that people value or worship. Or I love that when you see a little shrine somewhere by the side of the road and there's a little figure that really means something to somebody. And so the Celtic gods, you often get these Celtic heads with three faces on, and I've made a few of them. Colours, all the colours and paints I use, they are the incorrect. They're either people who donated matchpots to me, so I'm very much dictated to by people's interior design choices, or they're the wrong mixes at B&Q and paint shops. So again, it's trying to divert paints from landfill really that would get thrown away. And I haven't ever found it actually restricting in terms of the colour, because there's so much paint out there that people just leave at my door to my studio. That's Marimekko, I think, which is a Finnish designer from up until the present day, but started in the 50s, I think. I just love the colours of that, and I often try and get a sort of 60s, mid-century kind of palette. Unintentional, but it's there. I just love pattern. In a way, I think, if I hadn't done theatre design, I might have done textile design. But again, I don't think I'd have had the discipline because my attention span wouldn't have allowed it. And I just like making patterns. And this way I can make patterns however I want on bits of sculpture. Again, just colours I really, really like. And it's that medieval thing of the hands and the faces and the postures. I just particularly like them, and it's religious art. It's always had a bit of a draw for me. Again, some fantastic, one's German, one's American. That slightly dark thing, the sort of, that's a bit scary. You're not quite sure whether it's a benign or a malignant thing, I love all those kind of folk art. I think, and he's just there because I think he is. I don't know where he's from, I just think he's beautiful. And again, it all comes back to the Green Man and my childhood and my Mr. Kennett, my teacher, who told me all the folklore that I never really got over. I'm still that little kid, frightened of the Green Man coming out of the woods at him.
Does he know that you've been inspired by his story?
Him. When I moved back to Stroud, I tried to find him, and very sadly, he died.
Oh.
He died of Parkinson's about 5 years ago. I wish I had found him. I found my old head teacher by accident, and I talked to him about it, and he was like, oh gosh, yeah, but Mr. Kennedy, he was a liability. He was always terrifying with these stories. So that's it really. I mean, that's my story. I was racing through the things I like, and the reason I do it. I've just about managed to cobble together a living out of it, which works for me. I haven't got aspirations beyond that really. I just like making them, and I'll keep making them.
So, can you just open it up to you guys? Because there's a lot there. Is there any... Wait, Kim. Is there any questions that
It doesn't have to be.
wants to... Well, I've got one as well. But
I've got one.
yes. Somebody in the front there. Yeah.
You got kids?
I've got one.
Yeah.
Yes, one.
Have you reached a stage now where how old is it?
22.
Oh, 22.
Yeah.
And is that person, have they chosen something they want to do?
No.
So, in what way might you influence them about choice and future?
It's so difficult. Parenting has been a complete. Parenting is a strange experience for me. I realised how little influence I really have,
Yeah.
and that I think was quite a shock. And it took me 20 years to realise that. My son is wonderful. He is fiercely unartistic. He doesn't want to be anything to do with art, really. He's not very interested in it. So that's quite a strange kind of, but it's sort of irrelevant because, like you say, it's about doing what you want, and it doesn't matter if it's not artistic. I don't mind, but it is about sort of basically, like when I ran off to join the police force, it was kind of why. And it was suddenly I realised I needed to just do what I wanted, and what I wanted to do was make little figures, and I made a career out of that in the end.
Had you explored that, making little figures, before you kind of just came to it? Is it something
No.
you messed around? No. So you
No.
just were like, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, it was kind
Like
of.
at a moment of.
It was that book of right at the beginning, with those folk toys, and I just thought, well, I never had any of those, and I always wanted some, so I wanted to make some, and I started making some, and then I put them in a local, like you've got on at the moment, Somerset Arts. I put them in a local open studio on a festival and trail, and people liked them and responded to them, and that was rewarding. So I sort of, after my police debacle, I kind of started from scratch, but with the knowledge of having done a career in illustration that hadn't made me happy, because I got sidetracked by not making what I wanted to make. And really, again, going back to my son, it's doing what you. It doesn't matter what you want to do, but do what you want to do. It doesn't really matter what it is. So if your interest is football shirts, make a career out of football shirts. I remember some woman on the radio. She'd had a similar thing where she'd become a city banker and realised just how miserable she was, and she realised that she liked islands and she liked flying, so she set up her own job flying boats between islands in the South Pacific, and I just thought, brilliant. What do you like doing? I like this and I like that. So that's what I did.
Am I allowed yet?
Yes, you can.
So first off, books.
Yeah.
I noticed you referenced quite a few books.
Yeah.
Do you have are those all your books that you still have? Yeah. And have you kept books, or have you? I know you mentioned you found one in a charity shop, but are you still buying new? Like, are you one of those people?
Yeah, I do, and I have books that I've lost, and when I see them in the charity shop, it's like, there you are, I lost you, and I've got you back, and like the Reader's Digest book of British folklore.
Yeah.
And it's funny because on Instagram there's a whole kind of, a lot of people I follow on Instagram are folk-based and folklore-based. And whenever anyone, all the comments are, oh God, that book was the most important book I ever had as a child. And there's so many people, and the same with Susan Cooper and the Darkest Rising sequence. There's loads of people that are, oh God, that book sort of set me off on a whole world.
The other thing I wanted to ask was, I know you used to be an illustrator and you didn't like it,
Yeah.
but do you ever draw now for the fun of drawing? I know you don't draw for your figures, but
No,
you
it's
just...
funny, I don't. I don't. I mean...
Because you could obviously draw
I like
well.
drawing, but it's funny, isn't it? It's not what it's about for me. But I am aware that it's a sort of this thing that I have that I could use more, but I don't. It's funny. I mean, maybe I will. Maybe if I, something changed and I would go to that. It's,
I've got
but
one.
yeah, it's making it in three-dimensional.
One last question, which is, have you ever made anything really, really big?
Well, some quite big ones.
What's
I
the
would
biggest?
like to make something really big. I think the
Like as
biggest
big as
was
you?
Probably
Oh,
about that
okay,
tall,
wow.
yeah.
What was it?
That was it. There's a very big sort of a bit like those scary Father
With the
Christmases.
stuff.
Yeah.
Ah, okay.
It was for a shop window.
Okay.
Yeah, it was for a shop window, and they wanted something slightly scary. It was a slightly scary Father Christmas with a stick.
And same process of making, like same
Yeah, it was all
structural.
just bits of old polystyrene, and it's amazingly versatile. It really is, and the sort of inherent strength is very. But I do want to make some really big. I want to get some old wardrobes and make a sort of whole thing in the wardrobe. So you open it and it's like, wow, there's just a bit of lights and all bells.
That sounds
Installation.
really cool.
Yeah, so I do want to do that.
Well, if you do, can you please tell us so we can come and see it?
Well, yeah, no, I've got a show next December in the museum in Stroud, which I'm going to do that for. I'm going to do it as a series of wardrobes.
Wow.
Sounds gorgeous.
Yeah.
Can I make an observation? When I met Jim, finally, because I saw his work, for months and thought, oh, this is really cool. And this is for you, Jim, the observation. Your face, are you aware that your people are you?
No, people
Because
do say
I
that.
met Jim and I thought,
Yeah,
they're all him.
yeah.
I was going to say, is it a self-portrait?
Yeah.
Yes, and that
I
was
think
so
it is.
weird, and I didn't want to say anything because I thought
Yeah.
maybe it's totally, not conscious.
No, I don't think it was conscious, and it's still not conscious,
No.
but I am now aware of it.
Okay, good.
And I can't really not draw that particular face. Really,
Right,
is
right.
what I make and what I
No,
draw.
it's-
Even when I do the women,
Yeah,
they
they all look like you.
Yeah.
But I think that's really lovely, and you should,
Yeah.
not feel in any way embarrassed by that.
No,
And actually play with that,
Yeah.
as something. And I think, maybe when you do this wardrobe piece,
Yeah.
you should definitely hang about,
Yeah.
be there,
Yeah.
because I think people will love
It
that.
was particularly, I've shaved it off, but I had quite a pointy beard.
Oh.
And that made them look even more like that. Oh, God.
Excuse me, I just want to ask
Yeah.
something very
Yeah.
basic,
Yeah.
because I do a lot of art
Yes.
with George. The paper mache. Now, if I use the normal family food processor, is it going to be messed up, or can I use my
Yeah,
food
no.
processor still?
That was just, no, I'm pleased you mentioned it. It was a slight, it's not a food processor, it's
What is
a hand food cake mixer.
So I just, like
So
a
a bowl.
cauldron or whatever.
Yeah, get a
Yeah.
big bowl.
Okay.
Love that you said cauldron. A
Yeah,
cauldron, not a
yeah.
bowl.
Yeah, get a big cauldron, it's customary, isn't it? Get a cauldron. And then, so toilet roll, great, but you can
Yeah.
also use any kind of cardboard or plastic.
Did you say corn flour in it as well? Or
Yeah,
what does it do, the corn flour?
corn
Just
flour.
thickening it?
Yeah,
Makes it rise.
some people use normal flour, but
Yeah.
I find that makes it really sticky.
Okay.
So use a corn flour or any flour without gluten. So if you've got in the back of your cupboard a load of rice flour,
Yeah,
use
yeah.
gram flour because.
I just try to be explorative.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Just go for it.
So
Alright.
yeah, you just it's ultimate papier-mâché. Look
Yeah,
at her
yeah.
recipes, and
Yeah.
it's they're all on there. But it's corn flour, a filler, a polyfiller. Can't remember. She calls it joint compound. That's what Americans call polyfiller.
Okay.
And
yeah,
they
yeah.
call PVA Elmer's glue. So white.
Elmer's glue.
Yeah, I don't know. Why.
Maybe it was the brand in,
It must
in
be
there.
the
I
brand.
remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just school glue.
Yeah, I've got plenty of that.
And-
We're all right.
You've got about generally a couple of hours to work with it, maybe an hour.
So how thick is the consistency? When are you ready to use your product?
It's funny. I've made probably a couple of tons of it.
Yeah.
It's always slightly different because it depends on the weather.
Mhm.
So if it's hot, it does
Yeah,
dry
it
out
just-
quicker. Depends
okay.
how much the oil gives you a bit longer plasticity.
We have a go at this.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it sometimes it's very dry, and I add, but sometimes dry is good because you can actually mould with it.
Yeah.
Whereas mostly I apply it with a knife, a palette knife,
Yeah.
and then sand it down.
How long does it take before it's dry enough to sand?
Again, that's really weather dependent,
Okay.
and sometimes it can be frustrating. This woman who
What, like
ultimately-
hours, days,
Oh,
weeks?
days, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you know when it's truly dry because it
Has a
it's
different
beautifully
sound,
kind
doesn't
of
it?
rock
Yeah.
hard and lovely, and you can sand it, and it just becomes really a pleasure. It's very nice to work with.
These are my Christmas presents.
It's really, really good.
Do I
for
need to
that.
spend any
Yeah.
money, Josh?
Yeah, no, you
That's
don't.
all you're going to do for the next
You
month.
really don't.
Make things.
They'll be smashing, you know. And yeah, you can apply it to, you can stick it on anything. I mean, I've repaired crockery with it quite. I mean, obviously you can't then pour boiling water, but you know, I've repaired things with it a lot as well. It sticks to anything. Brilliant.
Can you colour it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. What, to actually colour it?
When you're mixing it?
Yeah. Obviously I paint it, but
Yeah.
no, but you can add colour to it. So you can either add inks and dyes, or if you add
Powder paint?
emulsion paint or powder paint, anything, yeah,
Yeah.
colour. I mean, as itself, inherent sort of as a material, it's got a very lovely quality in that, because some of my pieces I don't paint, because once you've sanded them and filled them and sanded them, you get a lovely patina. I never know how you patina or patina. It's probably scone and scone. You get a lovely patina on it where it just becomes quite sort of pinky and just got a warmth to it. So yeah, but you could play with that. You can also scratch it, score it, and then fill it and sand it, and then you get a sgraffito effect, which is really nice.
That makes me think, when you said about the layers that we live on, I
Yeah,
was thinking about, is it palimpsest or palimpsest
Yeah.
or something? Well, it's kind of all
Yeah.
the skins of where we've been.
Yeah,
come
yeah,
from.
absolutely.
I love that, yeah.
And I have sort of, I did a piece last year that I've always met, and I probably, it's one of those things that sits in the back of your mind, in the back burner. But I did a piece which was about that, which was
Yeah.
kind of layers of
I really love
different
that.
stories.
Yeah.
All on one piece, and it was scratching it, sanding it down so that it almost disappeared, putting another one on, sanding it down, and building up stories.
I love it on shops when you can see what they used to be. There's
Yeah.
a shopping through which says something on the.
Yeah,
It doesn't
no,
do
I
it
love
anymore,
that.
and
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
yeah, right, and
Yeah.
particularly some weird sort of Victorian thing that doesn't even exist
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
Sort of, you know, purveyors of.
I think it's really funny when you see it really confidently done, like Barclays Bank carved into it, and it's now a coffee bar.
Yeah.
They thought it was going to be that forever. Can I just say it was absolutely lovely to see Mr. Pogel up there.
Oh,
A real Oliver Postgate Peter Firmin fan. Yeah.
oh yeah. I mean,
And I remember one fantastic day when they showed you the inside of the Pogel's house on Watch with Mother. And I was like, oh my God, Mrs. Pogel's pots and pans. It was like,
I just love it. I mean,
Yeah.
little worlds, and Oliver Postgate is a brilliant
Yeah.
creator.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to bring
Yeah,
this
sorry.
bit to a climax because I hope some of you will stay and have a cup of tea and a cup of coffee. And Jim is not going anywhere.
No,
you can
no.
talk to him. But I'd just like to say thank you so much, Jim. It was so stimulating.
Yeah, thank you.
And just to remind everybody that we've got 2 more talks if you live locally. So we've got another one in November, which are these 2 young filmmakers who come in to talk about their career and the work they're doing, and work across all. One's a musician as well as a filmmaker, another is a photographer as well as a filmmaker. They've both been actors, you know. So there's all this sort of cross mix. And when's that happening? Is that
I
November?
think it's the 12th
The
of
12th.
November. It's on a
It's on a Saturday,
again.
same time. So
Yeah.
do come. And then in December we have Diana Milstein, who some of the books you might have seen. She
Miss
does
Smith.
these little postcard books and a big book, and she has this whole other persona. And she's coming to talk about all the work she does, which is also performance,
Screen
painting,
printing,
screen printing, illustration, painting, you know, so, and that's in December, I think, early December.
December the 3rd.
Yes, yes. And then hopefully in the new year we will, you know, do some more.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming. Please help yourself to tea and coffee, and if you haven't had a chance to look at all the amazing things in the gallery, do.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.